Mukam karoti vacharam pangum dangayate kirim yat kripatam aham vande Paramanandam Madhavam. I salute that Madhava, source of supreme bliss, whose grace makes the dumb eloquent and the cripple cross the mountains. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavai Tejasvinavaditam Astum Avidvishavai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us. May that one make our work full of vigor and enthusiasm. May our study also have vigor and efficiency. May we not cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So you're very welcome to the recommencement of the 14th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. This chapter discusses, obviously, the three gunas. The subject is considered to be so important that this is not the only place where this is discussed. Shankaracharya's commentary in the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, for example, will mention that while we may disagree with the Sankhya's on many important issues and the final conclusions with regard to the, if you like, the structure of the cosmos and the structure of the psychology and the structure, still with regards to the three gunas, the Sankhyas are the experts. So these three gunas we discussed previously as three ropes that bind us, like three sides of a triangle. When one dominates, the others go into submission or into hiding, or they become lesser. And when one dominates, another one dominates, the other two go into a state of a secondary place or tertiary place. And throughout the day, we'll find that there's an interplay between all of these three. That is, we don't have one or the other exclusively, but one may dominate at a certain time. And the student has to really learn the art of observing the mental field and seeing which one of these is dominating. Is it the sattva, is it rajas, or is it tamas? And when noticing rajas and tamas, by virtue of the fact that we know that it really is as a result of our own ignorance and manifest in two different ways, rajas and tamas, we have to learn the art of bringing out memories, elevating memories derived from art or literature, derived from perhaps pilgrimages or holy scenes. And from this great storehouse of memory, we can put it in this way: we ask the Lord, please deliver us an enlightening, joyful memory so that we can saturate the mind with the one element, sattva, this element of purity, illumination. And this psychologically has the effect of neutralizing these other waves which produce pain, namely rajas and tamas. So we can see or notice at any given time that one or the other of these will dominate, seeing which one it is, and using the advantage of moments in time. We can, like a gear stick in a car, go from the lowest aspect of it, which is laziness, indolence. We can easily notice it, lack of enthusiasm, procrastination, it could be a symptom as well, and take that attention and at least put it up one notch higher to rajas. Rajas, of course, along with tamas, is full of selfishness, self-centeredness. Whatever we want to achieve, we try to achieve out of a sense of selfishness. Even in religion, it's interesting that in a discussion between Sister Nivedita and Swami Vivekananda on board a ship on the way back to England, And so many intimate conversations took place on this ship. One of them, Swami Vivekananda remarks, "It is selfishness," he says, "that we must seek to eliminate. I find that whenever I have made a mistake in my life, it has always been because self entered into this calculation. Where self has not been involved, my judgment has gone straight to the mark." In other words, where selfishness is not present, sattva has the effect of clarification and efficiency. Straight to the mark, no doubts. He says, without this self, there would have been no religious systems. If a man had not wanted anything for himself, do you think he would have had all this praying and worship? Why? He would never have thought of God at all, except perhaps for a little praise now and then at the sight of a beautiful landscape or something. And that is the only attitude there ought to be, all praise and thanks, if only we were rid of self. This gives us a clue as to how to elevate the mind to sattvic position. I've tried to make the theme of this evening something like aspiring for the very highest. Just as we would want to shift the mind from an attitude of indolence to an attitude of at least activity, at least that may be better than indolence, and to elevate it further to pure illumination, a spring of joy, a wellspring of joy that keeps us elevated, keeps the mind elevated constantly. There's a great art in doing it, where we learn to transform the habit level of the mind by making this sporting occupation. And see, at the risk of repeating myself, because in many classes I give these examples. So, supposing you have an allocation of 20 seconds, 20 seconds being available for you to do something useful, and you're playing a sport of guiding thought, a kind of game of guiding thought, and you ask God, please be my divine scorekeeper. You being all-knowing, you know exactly what's going on in every given moment. I may be careless and miss one moment or the other, but you will notice everything. And so given now the fact of 20 seconds, even the way of thinking of it, I wasted 4 seconds. Why wasted? Because when I consult Grand Scorekeeper, the Lord himself, and ask, what was the quality of all the thoughts that went through the mind in the previous 4 seconds? Starting 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 4 seconds, with the capacity to go up to 20 seconds. Lord, what were my 4 seconds like? And he says, unfortunately, my child, it was all to do with selfishness. It was all to do with self-reward. It was all to do with greed. It was all to do with some thoughts of how you repose another, or some commiseration because somebody blamed you. And later on in this chapter, 14th chapter, we get a very important term, gunatita. I have mentioned it previously. One who transcends these 3 strands, these 3 ropes, these 3 aspects of nature itself. What are the qualities of this gunatita? We'll discover, but in brief, somebody who is equal-minded. Somebody has a steady equilibrium. And then we recognize a term previously mentioned, sthita prajna, somebody of steady wisdom, and we see the qualities are the same. When somebody blames me, I don't react to get upset. When somebody praises me, again, I don't react and become puffed up, proud, walking around, oh, somebody praised me, then somebody else insulted me, or somebody else said, oh, your talks are useless. Oh, deflation. Somebody says, oh, your talks are wonderful. Oh, inflation. So we find this economic term of inflation is there in psychology. So if you have this evenness of mind, you have exactly what everybody is looking for. What everybody is aspiring for ultimately is a state of content happiness. And happiness comes when I'm completely fulfilled, nothing else to get. There's no absence of anything, no gaps to fill. Everything is completely full, absolutely content. And we know it is not around things that are egocentrically orientated, such as riches or material possessions. Common sense tells us, and observation tells us, that this does not bring happiness. It only provides an aspect of our life with a certain temporary relief. And then happiness, of course, is defined by not having any pain anywhere in any particular region. But of course, being different regions, some other thing may topple our satisfaction cart. And we may go into a severe upset, and it doesn't take much for us to go into the deep hole of melancholy and depression. So this question, this technique of gunas is so much repeated that it emphasizes its significance and its importance. Because if we're able to master these three evolutionary forces, these three psychological aspects of the mind, then we are able to free ourselves. And freedom is our highest aspiration. Even though we may not know it, freedom is our highest aspiration. So by quietly enacting varieties of hard, captivating sattvic scenes in the conscious mind, then we can form a chain reaction. So by starting that chain reaction, I remind you what I said last week. We do two things. We immobilize this rajas and tamas, as I mentioned. And we do it in a good humored way. Even in the same text that Swami Vivekananda mentions, he's mentioning a conversation that he had with Swami Purnananda. And that was something about a contrast between liberal-minded people and conservatives. Conservatives are submitting, but the liberals are struggling because something is not right and we have to do something about it. But when you really think of it, this doing something about it, this struggle, is a struggle to achieve satisfaction in its absence. So there's a very important question arising that, and just to remind you that these three gunas are collectively described over and over again. The 9th stanza, once more, tells us that sattva binds one to happiness. It's also binding, but it also is the formula for shifting our gear to the highest in such a way that there is absolute clarity. And then that very instrument is no longer required. Like a scaffolding, when you build a building, you put a scaffolding. When the building is complete, you no longer require the scaffolding. And the scaffolding comprises many different things. It comprises religion, maybe even organized religion, some kind of training, some kind of education, even some kind of theology, some kind of step-by-step progression by a teacher and a scripture leading you upwards and onwards. But after that, you don't require anything. Like a guide on your way, and you say, where is so-and-so? And they point you in the direction. And when you go on, you no longer need that entity. Or like a spacecraft, something like a shuttle that goes off into space and no longer requires its rockets and dispenses with them and leaves them behind. So in the same way, we can dispense with all of these binding things which bind us and condition us. The resultant effect, of course, is our own misery. So sattva does that, binds us to happiness, rajas to action, self-motivated action, action with self-interest, egocentric thoughts, while tamas truly veils knowledge and blinds one to heedlessness. And last week I may have mentioned the example of this veiling, where we make the mistake of seeing a snake where there's a rope. And this misunderstanding requires three components. Well, the misunderstanding requires two components. The revelation requires one. These two components means in order to make the mistake, something is hidden and something else is projected. This whole world hidden and projected. And I may have mentioned the study of science is really the study of these three gunas. These three comprise, otherwise called Maya. That is the fact of our mistake. And so tamas will bind us by veiling our knowledge and blinding us to a state of heedlessness where we don't care. Now, you may have noticed all of these three at different times throughout the day or throughout your life. We can sometimes call this different moods. Sometimes the mind feels lazy, but this is seen as an obstacle. And sometimes the mind is in turbulent activity, and this is also seen as an obstacle. And sometimes the mind is calm, and we find we get a corresponding feeling of contentment when this happens. So a very interesting question comes up. How do these gunas act one over the other? And I've mentioned before how it is that by promoting one over the other and doing it systematically in such a way that it becomes saturated, coming back to my example, 20 seconds being available. Lord, how is it? How was the first 4 seconds? I'm sorry, all minus. That is all egocentric, and therefore, unfortunately, you've sown the seeds of pain, sorrow. All right, never mind. I won't live with that. I have 16 more seconds within a framework of 20 available. Let me put in the higher values. Let me put in, from my storehouse of memories, elevated thoughts. Thoughts which are full of delight, thoughts which are full of joy, thoughts which are charming. Put those in with not a single element, not even a small fragment, not even a small grain of selfishness. We find our highest happiness is in these moments. Put it in. And when we put in, if we put in concepts, we have to put in words. The two go together. What is a word? A word has a corresponding concept. And so when we put in words such as strong, true, wise, full, free, truth, beauty, goodness, love, harmony, put all those in 16 seconds. Then playfully and with great love, we can turn to our divine scorekeeper. Lord, how was the score? He said, you had -4. Yes, you told me that already. All right. Then you had 16 pluses, 16 positives, 16 joyful moments. Net result, net investment in your habit level, net investment to your unconscious or subconscious bank account, fixed deposit account, because it's a habit level, +12. Thank you, Lord. Like that, you build up and reform the whole unconscious mind in such a way that sattva dominates. And I always say that what is salvation? Salvation is a minimum requirement, is 51% sattva, 49% other things. And while sattva itself has to leave us, sattva makes us clear. Sattva gives us the clarity whereby we are able to see the vision of truth. Now, so sattva asserts itself by predominating, and the verse that goes with this is Rajas tamascha vibhuya sattvam bhavati bharata rajaha sattvam tamaschaiva tamaha sattvam rajastata. Sattva asserts itself by predominating over rajas and tamas, and rajas over sattva and tamas over sattva and rajas. Is a very, very important stanza. Because what it means is that, supposing I was a fatalist, I would say, just accept that statement. Oh, I see. So it's that's how it works. But if I believe in free will, as we should, then I have the capacity to assert what I want. Put in sattva, play that game. If you don't play it in a joyful spirit, firstly, you have misunderstood what this life is. This life is nothing more than the Lord's eternal play on himself. And so we shouldn't take it as seriously as we probably do. We should remind ourselves continuously of this. And secondly, second important thing is that if we assert our self-will and insert what we want, not only joyfully, but we are able to transform not only our own lives, but we're able to transform the lives of others. There's a wonderful quote from a Christian saint, Vincent de Paul, in the Western world, and I don't know, many places in the world, I think, there are St. Vincent de Paul societies dedicated to assisting people who are poor or miserable, people in physical or material distress. And this saint makes a wonderful, wonderful statement. He says, if God is the center of your life, no words are necessary. Your mere presence will touch hearts. In other words, put it in another way, when your mind is saturated with sattva, there is a certain way that you will look. So, what is this way? There are some symptoms of when one guna predominates. Let's deal with sattva first. Salva dvarishu dehismin plagasha upajat te jnanam yadha yadha tada vidyat vivritam sattvam ityut. When the light of knowledge through every gate, wonderful statement, when the light of knowledge beams through all the gateways of the body, we can remind you that the Bhagavad Gita mentions in one place, certainly, in the next chapter it will tell us, and that this body is a city of 9 gates. And the Kathopanishad, which we discussed in another series, the Vedanta series on Saturday mornings, we discussed comprehensively the Kathopanishad's idea of 11 gates. That is a decimal system plus 1. This 11-gated city belonging to what? One who is ajna, unborn, and one who is avakra, unflickering, unchanging, whose consciousness is unchanging or unflickering. In other words, there is some entity that sits within you with these characteristics. And so when we look at the body, see, there's an unusual way of looking at it. We can see it as not just my body, in fact, not my body at all, but God's city with many gates. The gates are the sense organs, eyes, ears, and so on. So when the light of knowledge is deemed to be something like a luminous element, something that lights up. Because in the example of our mistake of the rope, our mistake of seeing a snake, where in fact there's a rope, was dispelled when we beam the light of knowledge on the scene. And when we see it for what it is, all our fear dissipates and all our ignorance is gone about this fact. And so when this light of knowledge beams through all the gateways of the body, then it may be known that sattva is predominant. We see saints, you see, in pictures and art with a shining face, with a halo, not just a halo above, but also a luminous halo around the head and so on. That from every part of the body, a shining thing is there. We see immediately, and that is what this Vincent de Paul is saying. He's saying that, again, if God is the center of your life, no words are necessary. Your mere presence will touch hearts. Jesus said you cannot hide your light under a bushel or a bed. In other words, it's self-evident. These great beings, we see the practical effect of this. 2 incidents I'll recall if we talk about the life of Jesus. When he calls a fisherman unknown to him, "Come, follow me." What was the magnetism of the man that immediately that fisherman follows him, drops the net immediately and follows him? Another incident, in a crowd going into Peter's mother-in-law's house or mother's house, somebody touches the cloak of Jesus, tassel of Jesus' cloak. Who touched me? Why did you bother? Who touched me? We're trying to get into this house. No, I felt power being withdrawn from me. And that woman was cured of a hemorrhage. And then there was a transfiguration. Can we get some understanding of what all this means? Well, yes. 1st of January is Kalpataru Day, where a great transformation was shown. That is, a transfiguration was shown to all the devotees at the Koshipo Garden House. And the transforming effect that it had on everybody. And it was described, you see, about this shining light. And how the Holy Mother used to say that Ramakrishna's skin was almost luminous. So we can take this and many examples to understand, of course, if your whole inside is nothing but shining light, it'll shine through every pore of the skin. And that means you can't restrict it. It means it has a transforming effect to everybody, all those around you. And unbeknown to anybody, will have an invisible effect, like a whole wake, like a whole ocean wake of waves affecting everyone and the whole universe. We think this is an exaggeration sometimes when we say these things. Except, of course, when we really study physics at the fundamental level, we find that 2 particles, when entangled, are forever associated. When you change one, the other changes simultaneously. And this is a proven effect. And so this is because there is a continuum. There is no separation in time or space between anything in reality. And so if a lamp, for example, is placed within a box, just fitted with glass, or glasses of various hues, its light shines through the glasses. And the intensity of the light adds to the brilliance pouring out. So you can say man's body is something like that, like a box. And the sense organs are the gateways, as we mentioned, and the light of the self within to beam into view. So while in Sattva, the effulgence of the self is at its very height. And in the act of seeing, there is sharpness in hearing, there is alertness in performing action, there is precision accompanied by deliberation and accuracy. Now, what about somebody whose characteristic, whose dominating characteristic or dominating guna is rajas? Lobha, pravriti, arambha, karmanam, ashamaha, spraha. Rajasya edani jayante vivrite parda sabha. Lobha is greed. And pravriti is intense activity. And so greed, activity, the undertaking of actions, unrest, longing, these arise when rajas is dominant or predominant. Let's take each one by one. What is greed? Some people think that greed is eating a lot of food. Well, that also might be, yes. But greed is there for objects. Wherever there is a desire for something and a movement toward getting it, we find if it is for ourselves, naturally it's greed. So greed is the evidence of a rajasic temperament. The undertaking of actions that arise in unrest, of course, you can have sattvic actions also, but rajasic actions means me first and others after. The selfishness that Swamiji was talking about. And the unrest, of course, is a result of it, is an effect of it, and longing. I long for this, I long for that. There's no end to it. So these arise when this rajas is dominant. See, an attempt at making the property of others one's own is really what greed is. And you can take it further. You say, but the things I desire don't belong to anybody. Well, you forgot. They belong at least to God. None of it is your own. So any little success in any new undertaking brings in elation, of course. Naturally, achievement brings it in, success brings it in. And any little setback in another undertaking brings in dejection. So you have this mix, elation and dejection. And there's a kind of curve, you put it on a graph, you see peaks and troughs everywhere. So these are the traits born of rajas, and they're accompanied normally by a great impatience to have it done immediately, if not sooner. Then, of course, we have to deal with tamas. Aprakasho pravritascha pramado maha evacha tamasyetani jayante vivrite kurur nanandana. It's indiscrimination, inertness, darkness of prakashana, darkness, inertness, heedlessness, and delusion. These arise when tamas is prominent. A literal meaning, of course, as I said, of prakash is darkness. The darkness of the mind leads one to indiscrimination. Don't forget the primary spiritual, 101 spirituality, if you will, is discrimination, discernment. We, without knowing what is useful to us, what is not, what is real, what is unreal, see, lead us from the unreal to real, lead us from darkness to light, from death to immortality. This is essentially a prayer of discrimination, showing the importance of this. If we are just behaving indiscriminately, and in another sense indiscriminate because we're not in any way observing and catching the mind in one of its negative states that is acting and working against us. And then inertness, laziness. We find today a lifestyle, a certain lifestyle makes us lazy, depletes all our energy, and it's a catch-22 situation. That means that our enthusiasm gets less when our physical activity gets less. Our physical activity gets less because of an attitude of laziness, and we postpone something, and the enthusiasm gets lowered as a result, and we are simply caught up in this. Let me do some exercise, for example, or let me undertake some endeavor, but it's always tomorrow. Now, those people who make money from exercise gyms, they know this very well. They know at the beginning of the year, under normal circumstances, that they'll get many, many subscribers with great intentions to do all kinds of positive things to the body. But they know we have to charge you fees up front for the whole year because it's money for nothing. That means that by February, maybe even earlier, at least by March, the first quarter of the year, all those people with such good intentions, not all of course, but a large proportion, would have just dropped away. So sometimes we have to renew and reinvigorate our good intentions if we are to get something done. I always tell people, of course, and I remind you here, if I've told you before, that any success requires 3 Ds. It requires a great desire for what you want. It requires determination to get it. And it requires dedication. Behind me is Sister Nivedita, the dedicated one. She had all these 3 attributes, and that's what made her great. She had a great desire to do the very best for India, to put India's place on the world stage so that Vedanta can be taught to everybody, and to uplift those people in India under colonialism for over 1,000 continuous years. She had a passion for that, which was given by her teacher, Swami Vivekananda. And then she had a great determination. She had an undaunted spirit. No doubt everybody gets disheartened from time to time, but it's how to recover. You see, it's like 2 people who are running a race, let's say 100 meters or something, and one has trained well. The religious way of putting it is one has done tapasya and the other one has done nothing. They both run. Both of them will feel tired and exhausted at the end, but the one who's trained will recover quickly. The other one may collapse and be taken off on a stretcher. So it requires this great, great determination and strength. It requires great, great resolve. And that requires strength. One of the great, great teachings of this Bhagavad Gita is this lesson of strength. Yield not to unmanliness. So strength is the key message. And the key message derived from the Upanishads is strength. It takes strength to go against the grain. It takes strength to control the mind. It takes strength to do all these things. It takes strength to think positively when all around you and all people around you may well be negative. So this discrimination is important, and indiscrimination, or darkness really, and a lack of acknowledgement of what is true and what is lasting, and inertness, laziness, and heedlessness, that is, I don't care, and delusion, these arise from tamas. Then you want to wonder, is there any connection between the ascendancy of the gunas and reincarnation of the Jivatman, where the Jivatman will come back again and again? And what will be the relationship? Suppose saying, I saturate the mind with sattva. What will be my afterlife condition? And so these questions are addressed. Yada sati pradve tu pralayam yati me deha tado tat mam vidam yogan amalan pratipadyate. Yada, when sattva sattva pravriti, having become predominant to truly pralayam, death, yati, meets dehabhre, the embodied one, tada, then of the knowledge of the highest, uttama vidam, to the worlds, that is lokan, of the spotless amalan pratipadyate, he attains. If the embodied one meets with death, when sattva is predominant, then he goes to the pure worlds, sattva being the purity. In other words, mind is saturated with purity, you go to pure worlds of those who know the highest. Godly thoughts will produce the godly world. And then, of course, those who have really saturated the mind with the sattva to that extent will go to Brahmaloka. That is, they will go to the area, as it were, of cosmic mind, and from there progress toward the highest principle. What about those Or, of course, those who have done away with that sattva completely will have gotten their freedom in this very life. No return ticket is necessary. And what about those who are rajasic? You on your deathbed and you're worried about all kinds of material things. Rajasi pralayam gattva karma sangisu jayate tata pralinas tamasi mudhayanishu jayate. Meeting with death in Rajas. He is born among those attached to action, naturally. You only reap what you sow. And then, of course, dying in tamas, he is born in the wombs of the deluded. And so it is important to know what condition the mind should be at any moment, because the last moment is this moment. This moment is the last moment. It won't come again. A new moment also becomes the last moment. Every moment really is the last moment. Until the physical body goes, and through conditioning, the very last thought will be the one that you cultivated during your life. Karmanaha sukrutsya satikam nirmalam param rajasastu param dukkham ajnanam tamasa param. The fruit or the rewards of good action, they say, is sattvika and pure, and truly the fruit of rajas is pain, and ignorance is the fruit of tamas. Rajas, of course, is the one instrument to save man from stagnation. It's much better to be rajasic than to be tamasic. As soon as you notice each one, you can elevate it straight to the top gear of sattva. Now, in what other respects we might ask, do the gunas get themselves distinguished one from the other? And the answer comes like this. From sattva arises wisdom, greed from rajas, heedlessness and error arise from tamas, and also ignorance. So sattvat samjayate jnanam rajaso labha evacha pramadamao tamaso bhavatu jnanam evacha. Then what is mentioned in this stanza is the truth about the gunas. Man should therefore, of course, always endeavor to subdue the very base gunas in him and rise up high, aspire for height. Some people say, you see, this ideal of even perfection, or this ideal of freedom, or this idea even of marginal purity is a very high ideal. And all we find is struggle. But that's because you didn't take this joyfully as a continuous game of replacing sattva every time you see rajas and tamas, replacing rajas and tamas with sattva, I should say. And those who are fixed in sattva, where do they go? They go upwards. You can think of it like this. And rajasika downwards, tamasika downwards, and rajasika remain. And so, abiding the functions of the lowest gunas, you find the tamasikas go down, rajasikas, no improvement, just status quo. But sattva, you start moving, as it were, upwards. But if you aspire to do that, it's now become rajas. You see how subtle it is. Is it sufficient if a man aspires to sattva and gets established there? Is the minimum requirement enough? The short answer, of course, is no, because transcending the gunas is mukti, is freedom. Nanyam gunebhya kartaram yatha tusta nupashyati gunebhascha param veti madbhavam so vigachati. When the seer perceives no agent other than the gunas, that is, understands that all this activity that is being witnessed, what we classify as nature, is nothing more but this interplay of these three aspects called gunas, and knows him who is higher than the gunas, that which is beyond, that was described in the previous chapter as kshetra and kshetrajna, then he enters into my being, says Krishna. And then we have to find out, what do we mean by my being? Is that the highest? So Prakriti is the agent. I'm not the agent. This ego-centric position says, I'm the agent, I'm the doer. We have to transcend the prophet-actor complex. And this, of course, is called Gunatita, the state of Gunatita. Now, Sri Ramakrishna has this to say. What are the indications of Ishvara revealing himself in the heart of the devotee? The dawn is the harbinger of the sunrise. And in the same way, similarly, selflessness, absence of agency, purity, and such like divine qualities precede the spiritual vision of Ishvara. So we may ask, what is the benefit that befalls the one who is Gunatita, who transcends these gunas? So let us have a look. Gunan etan atitya trin dehi deha samudra bhavan janma mrityo jara dukhe vimukto mritam ashnute. The embodied one, having crossed over these three gunas. Is it true that we are embodied? No. The embodied one, that is how it's perceived. So when we talk about the Jivatman, we're actually saying that entity that appears to be bound. Having crossed, as it were, we have to add this in our own commentary. Having crossed over, as it were, these three gunas, out of which the body itself is evolved, is even made, and evolves, is the drive forward, is freed from birth, death, decay, pain, and attains to immortality. Again, you see how we can describe these three gunas as three evolutionary forces, three things that make variation and change. The plenitude of Brahmanyana is explained in this stanza. The Jivatman resides in the body, which is made up of the three gunas, but his ideal is not to identify himself with his residence. This is beautiful. His human body is just three ingredients and has become a temporary residence for the Atman. So the Jivat Mukta, who is he? He is one who is freed from this body consciousness, even while dwelling in this body, not going to any other place, not going here or there. Fixed as he is in the bliss of Brahman, he has virtually transcended these three gunas. The body, says Sri Ramakrishna, has its birth and death, but the Atman is free from these modifications. He is like the areca nut in its shell. When still tender, this nut and its shell hold fast to each other. But when ripe, the nut separates itself from the shell. In this way, in Brahma Jnana, the body consciousness drops away. Of course, the person may still be living, but the body consciousness drops away. I am not the body, says this person. Now, an occasion now will arise and has arisen for Arjuna to raise a doubt. And so he raises it, he avails himself of it. So he speaks. He says, Arjuna Vacha. See? And just as we want to know, how does the man of Sthita Prajna look? How does a person of Gunatita look? So Arjuna Vacha ke lingaishtrin gunan etan atito bhavati prabhu kimachara katam chaitam tam strin gunan vartate. What are the marks? How do we know? What are the marks, O Lord, of him who has crossed over these three boundaries, these three bondages, these three ropes, these three qualities, these three substances, these three gunas? What is his conduct? And how does he rise above the gunas? Two questions. How can we recognize this state? And secondly, how can we get there? And so now, in answer to that, Sri Bhagavan vacha prakasham cha pravrittim cha mohan eva cha pandava tadveshte samprabhruttani na nivruttani kankshati. He, O Pandava, who hates not light, activity, and delusion when present, nor longs after them when absent. Light, activity, delusion, these three gunas. I've often heard somebody say, oh, we have to get rid of this maya, equivalent to a combination of these three gunas by virtue of its being hidden and projecting and revealing. But if you're enlightened, somebody who has transcended these three gunas will understand these play of these gunas and not in any way be affected. He doesn't hate them. He doesn't hate them. He doesn't long for them when they are not present. Nor is he worried if they're present. So the man who is immersed in sattva has his intellectual pursuits and refined pleasures in which he is deeply absorbed. See, different people have different pleasures. At the lowest level, our pleasure is in eating or drinking or the sense pleasures. But a cultivated mind, his joy is within art and sculpture and painting and poetry and maybe science. But even transcending those interests and not being affected whether they're there or not, this is gunatita. So if you are attached, you see, to the higher things of life, where the mind is pure, then that is also bondage. And the person caught up in rajas is always up and doing. What seems good to him, he executes devotedly. And then, of course, what other is held bad by him is abhorred and avoided. Preferences, things he prefers to do, things he likes to do, things he dislikes to do. And so therefore bound still by the gunas. And the man adhering to tamas, lethargy and sleep are most welcome. It's a way of blanking off from stressful situations. Let me sleep. And there's an excuse. I need my rest. I'm stressed, so I need rest. And be careful. It may well be not what the body requires, but a condition of laziness, an attitude of laziness, an attitude of darkness. And the Brahmanyani who has soared beyond these three gunas evinces merit. Merits found in a mirror, truly reflects the objects placed before it. And when nothing is presented before it, it remains in its own state. Sri Ramakrishna has this to say. How do the Jivan Muktas, the liberated souls, live in the world? They live like the kingfisher that dives deep into the water to catch fish, but doesn't get wet. The few drops that happen to be on its feathers are shaken off with ease. Liberated souls are unaffected by the happenings in this world. The expression like water off a duck's back. And then this is another answer. Another answer comes to the question. We had two questions are being asked. He who's sitting like one unconcerned is moved not by these gunas, who knowing that the gunas operate is firm and moves not. Udasinavad ashino gunaya yona vichalyate guna vartante itya eva yo vatishtati ne gate. So your heel doesn't shake, nor does one who has transcended the gunas. And then sama dukkha sukha sutta sama lostasma kanchanaha tulya priya priyo dhihras tulya nanindatma samstuti. Balanced in pairs of opposites. Same thing we heard for Sthita Prajna. Balanced in extremes, with pleasure or pain. Self-abiding, viewing a clod of earth and a stone and gold alike, something Ramakrishna took literally. Here's gold, or here's money, here's coins, and here's clay. Both they get thrown into Ganga. A stone and gold alike, the same to agreeable and disagreeable, firm, the same in censure and praise, completely equal-minded, complete equilibrium, not affected, because not attached to these gunas and a combination that they have made. The same in honor and dishonor also. Whether you raise a person up or lower the person, the same to friend and enemy, no enemies, same thing. Abandoning all undertakings, he is said to have risen above the gunas, all undertakings that are egocentric. And so that goes on. Mana pamanayos tulyas tulyo mitrari pakshasho salvarambara itayagi gunatitaha sa uchate. These three stanzas are in reply, of course, now to the second question raised by Arjun. But the third and last question is being answered now. So it goes like this. Mamchayo vyabi charina bhakti yogana sevati sagunan samatityaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. And this is how. How do we transcend the gunas? And he who serves me with an unswerving devotion, he going beyond the gunas is fitted for becoming Brahman. So that is, he who has saturated the mind with sattva. And you can see from a devotional point of view, it's like this. He who serves me, that is God, with unswerving devotion, then he goes beyond that. The devotee sees Ishvara in many forms, says Sri Ramakrishna. But when he gets into samadhi, this very Ishvara is realized by him as the formless, infinite Nirguna Brahman. It is this realization that bhakti and jnana get harmonized. And then why is this? Is bhakti the only means now to go beyond the gunas? No. Brahmano hi pratishtaham amratasya vyayasya cha shashvatasya cha dharmasya sukasya kantikasya cha. No, for I am the abode of Brahman, the immortal, immutable, unchangeable, the eternal dharma, the thing that brings everything into righteous harmony and virtue, a virtuous state, and absolute bliss. See, all the four yogas are here then harmonized. Bhakti and the attainment of the Saguna Brahman, that's on the one side. And through it have been explained in the previous stanza. See, the immortal and the immutable Brahman, or the Nirguna Brahman, is reached by Jnana Yoga. Now, just in case you are unfamiliar with these terms, so Saguna Brahman with the qualities of Guna is a Brahman with the limiting adjuncts. of Maya as Saguna Brahman. Nirguna Brahman is naturally without these gunas. But these are not two different Brahmans. There's often a confusion like that. It's the same entity. So, the Nirguna Brahman is reached by Jnana Yoga. By serving the Lord through Karma Yoga, the eternal Dharma or the Sanatana Dharma, another name for Brahman, is made one's own. And so, and the eternal Dharma is there. We have this Karma Yoga. And then, of course, the practice of Raja Yoga or meditation culminates in the creation of Amritatara, this absolute bliss. The divine nectar provides absolute bliss, another name for Brahman. And so this is the last, in answer to the last question, how? The mythology has it that the Lord Shiva once made elaborate preparations to invade and lay siege to the iron, silver, and gold citadels of the three mighty Asuras, demons, who were, of course, invincible. And finally, the great Lord's opening his divine eye resulted in the total destruction of the demons and also their domains. And this is, of course, in a story form, a mythological representation of the transcendence of these three gunas, these three worlds. Now a wayfarer was passing through a dense forest, says Ramakrishna, and with this we finish. Three thieves sprang on him, overpowered him. Forthwith, he was relieved of all his possessions. The first highwayman then drew out his dagger to do away with the victim. The second bandit pleaded against such a drastic measure and voted for the binding the fellow fast and leaving him to his fate. But in a short while, the soft-hearted third robber reappeared. This is Sattva, released the victimized man and kindly showed him his way back home. The grateful wayfarer requested this unexpected savior to go along with him and accepted his gratitude and hospitality, but the stranger politely expressed his inability to go beyond his bounds and disappeared in the forest. A beautiful story to illustrate this fact. And so the world is the forest. The three gunas are the three thieves. The Jivatman is the wayfarer, you and I going on a pilgrimage, and the divine qualities are his possessions. Of the three gunas, Tamas tries to destroy him. Rajas binds him with lust, greed, anger, the three gateways of hell. And Sattva saves him from these fetters and shows him the way Godward. But guna as it is, Sattva cannot have access to the proximity of Brahman. It's just instrumental in it. Now, I continued a little longer looking at the clock here. When I look up, it's looking at the clock on the wall there. But this now concludes the 14th chapter. We may as well have concluded it now. So, Om Iti Srimad Bhagavad Gita Supanishatsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastri Shri Krishna Arjuna Samvade Guratraya Vibhaga Yogo Nama Chaturdaso Jayaha. In the Upanishad of the Bhagavad Gita, the knowledge of Brahman, the Supreme, the science of the Yoga, and the dialogue between Sri Krishna and Arjuna. This is the 14th discourse designated Yoga, the division of the three gunas. Next week, we go to a brand new chapter, 15th chapter, Purushottama Yoga, Yoga of the Supreme Self. May you all go in peace. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.